Okay, there we go. Close the door. Good to see you all again. Hopefully I'm going to finish up here on our introduction to religious studies and get onto the Catholic Church. Let's see how I do. And if I speak too fast, you can slow me down. If I'm speaking too fast and you can't understand what I'm saying, just let me know, please, because I noticed that in the last class or two that I might be not taking my time, and I apologize for that. I want to make sure that I don't rush through things. Let's see, we stop at that. Okay. Whoa. Whose name? Miss Pennick? No, I didn't call your name because I think I remember who you are.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. If I didn't call your name, it's because I believe I know who you are, but your face has gotten the name.
Sure.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I finished with agnosticism, and the next influence or assumption of religious studies is that has been influential on religious studies, I should say, is the idea of evolutionism, which perhaps you've heard of in your travels, which is the theory that all living things pass through stages of development from lower to higher forms. From the Latin words ex, which means out of, and volvo, to roll or to turn. Okay, so to turn out of or turn into, you might also say. So things turn into other things. And in the study of religion, you'll see this in the idea that human religions can be classified, and sometimes are classified, maybe not so much today, but in the past, yes, would be classified as from being more primitive, primary, to more developed, more civilized. The idea of evolutionism, it derives from this gentleman, Charles Robert Darwin. You can see his dates, he wrote a lot of books, but his famous book on evolution is called The Origin of Species. How? By means of natural selection, so that species develop because certain characteristics, allow them to thrive in certain environments or not thrive, and so they develop characteristics fitting to their environments. They evolve, if you will, and nature does this. It's just a natural process of things evolving, of things developing according to their environments and ways that attributes that cause them to give them success. And Darwin's work gave scholars a kind of hard theoretical explanation for human development. And so early scholars of religion were evolutionists, and just about everything that develops in the 1800s was influenced by evolution. So sociology pops up during the 1800s, psychology starts, and they're all evolutionists. They're all influenced very much by this idea, not just religious studies scholars, but early scholars were evolutionists who thought that human societies and religions could be arranged in order from top to bottom according to the levels of their complexity and rationality. Notice the Enlightenment idea of reason here. How rational were they? So, for example, a lot of times Christianity would be seen as, and even interpreted as, the religion of reason, a rational religion, and Jesus is presented as this kind of ethical teacher par excellence, the best ethical teacher. And then you have religions that might put other religions beneath him, like Judaism and Islam, and then Buddhism, or Buddhism might actually be higher up because Buddha was an ethical teacher as well. And then, what we might call primitive religions, native indigenous religions, would be seen as kind of uncivilized and unsophisticated, and they'd be placed at the bottom. Although, through anthropological study and religious studies study, we know that, a lot of indigenous religions are quite sophisticated systems for explaining the world. They might not be at the level of, say, other world religions, but they are not to be taken lightly. Nevertheless, this was kind of the prejudiced view that scholars had. An example would be a man named James G. Fraser, who was a religious studies scholar, I think he was more of an anthropologist than a religious studies scholar, but he wrote a famous book called The Golden Bough, and 1890, oh my eyeglasses, 1890, I believe, was the first date, and the SEQ means sequential, or sequens, which means it went through following editions. It was a very popular book. You probably can still find it on Amazon. To buy it on Amazon. It's a very influential book, but it was a popular book. And what he did in The Golden Bough was he reviewed the mythologies of the world. He was very much a mythologist and a folklorist, and was interested in the different stories that cultures tell. And he would pinpoint similarities between all these myths that he would describe about. Yes, he was a Scottish anthropologist. He was from Scotland, and he was an anthropologist. And in his theory of his evolutionary theory of religion, he thought religion, the basis or the basic form of religion would be magic, just simple rituals and activities that people use to control nature would be magic. But then magic evolves and it becomes more sophisticated and it becomes what we call religion. But even religion is still, in its way, unsophisticated in its explanation of the world, and religion will eventually evolve into science. And a lot of religious studies scholars, I think, had that kind of bias that science was the high point of human knowledge, and religion would eventually, and true religion, true religious belief, if they practiced it at all, was rational belief, unencumbered by all these mythologies and legends and stories about miracles and angels and stuff like that. Another example of this kind of evolutionary idea can be found in an article that I guess I read it, but I noted down by a man named Michael Brooks. Title of the article is Natural Born Believers. It's in the New Scientist. It was published in 2009. And he makes the argument that religion comes ultimately from the development of a larger brain mass in human beings, offering us the ability to conceptualize and imagine. So we imagine things, and we see things in the world. So we imagine, we see a bush moving, and we kind of impose agency onto it. We think that there's a spirit involved. Something's moving the tree. It's not just the wind, or if it is the wind, something's moving the wind to make the tree move. We have this evolutionary propensity to impose agency on natural objects. We have a propensity to see cause and effect, and to see purpose or meaning in the physical world. And we evolve these things because they helped us survive in the wild, so that we didn't get killed. It gave us, I guess, a sense of hope that there was purpose to what we were doing, and it wasn't just, when we were hunter-gatherers, get up, hunt for food every day, catch something, don't catch something, go to sleep, and that was repeat. That was basically your life, So that's kind of an evolutionary view of where religion comes from. It certainly couldn't come from a god or goddess or any sort of spirit because, again, materialism and naturalism. The world's made of matter. There is no supernatural naturalism. So those are you can see those assumptions in this guy's article. So religious studies. Oh, wait a second. Pass over that. What are some other influences on religious studies that I would like to highlight? Oh, yes. That was funny because he kind of looks like Charles Darwin, doesn't he? You're like, no? Oh, but... Since you asked, functionalism, from the Latin word, the verb fungor, to perform something, to execute something, to do something. So what does something do? It's a fancy way of saying what does something do for somebody? It's function. A famous pithy statement by E. Evans Pritchard, I think it was a British anthropologist, religion is what religion does. Well, thank you. That's very elucidating. Yeah. But I guess his point is you look for what when you see what's done, you can say, that's obviously something that's done that's religious. And this, when you see something else that's done, it's not religious. You look at its function and what it does for the community or the society to determine its religious value. And you establish it through that way. Religion shows what it is by its activity, how people dress, how people speak, where the places they go to, stuff like that. The person who's foremostly associated with this idea of functionalism is the anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, or you could pronounce it Bronisław Malinowski. He was a Polish ancestry. He wasn't from Poland at the time. I believe it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but he was a Polish ancestry. And he went out to study these people, the Trobriand Islanders, who is an island that's part of the nation of Papua New Guinea nowadays. Trobriand Islanders. It's not called that anymore. Did I write down? I guess I didn't write it down. I forget what name they give the islands now. But anyways, and there's a picture of him seated with some of the tribesmen. And so a functionalist anthropology or a functionalist religious studies focuses on what functions the religion serves for the human beings. And just in the case of Malinowski, when he was talking about like magic, which would be something religious as it functioned in or amongst the Trobriand Islanders, magic was something that provided a way to control uncontrollable situations. So he noticed that when the islanders were fishing near the shoreline, you could see the shoreline, okay? You weren't far away, you were out there fishing, everything was fine. It was kind of normal. It wasn't scary or fearful. It was under control. So there was no magic involved in the activities. But once you went out into the deep sea to fish, the islanders would go out farther, much farther into the deep sea to fish. Malinowski noticed that that's when the magical objects came out, and they started, saying their prayers, or I don't say their prayers, but they're going through the ritual forms that they needed to go through to try to control the situation, because now you're in an uncontrollable situation. You're in the middle of the ocean. You can't control what the waves are going to do, whether it's going to be choppy or not, or whether a shark attacks or something like that. So, and you can't see the shore, you can't see home or safety anymore. You're far out. So that's when he noticed that magic served a function. It didn't serve a function when they felt safe. So it told him something about the religious practice, that the religious practice functioned in times when a person didn't feel safe or comfortable. They wanted to control the situation. So we also look at functionalists, will also look at how religion elicits acceptance of activities, makes people follow them, or punishes people for certain behaviors. How does religion help in the integration and cohesion of society, make people feel that they belong, what function it does that. Sociology will also look at that as well. Structuralism is a theory, a system which looks at how things give structure to a life or to the life of a group or to people. Comes from the Latin word struo, which means to place by something or upon something. To fit together, structure, to fit together, struo, okay. And so the structuralist system, or those who follow that kind of philosophy or theory, see religion as a collective representation that is the product of human thought patterns and structures, okay? For example, say binaries. You see binaries a lot in religions, between good and evil, light and dark. Male and female, all this sort of stuff. And also raw food versus cooked food, clean and unclean. Okay, these binary divisions, these seem to be structures of the human mind that are imposed on the world through religion. Or imposed on the world, and religion is evidence of that. So religion is an expression of the society's structure of ideas, values, and beliefs. See this, for example, when we talk first about Hinduism, we talk about the caste system, and not just even caste, but it's kind of like this thing, this places you in society. Where do you belong in society? It provides you structure, but it also gives structure to the way the gods are, okay? To the way how the gods are and how they exist. Structure to the universe. The very universe is structured in the same way, with people at the heights and people at the bottom. So human thought for structuralism creates religion in order to make sense out of life. And a person who's associated with this, although he was not really a religious studies scholar, he was more a scholar of religion. He was more an anthropologist and kind of talked about mythology and so because he talked about mythology, he necessarily had to talk about religious ideas. Was this Frenchman Claude Lévi-Strauss, and he wrote a couple of books: The Savage Mind, La Pensée Sauvage, The Savage Mind. But maybe more to our point of religious studies, Mythologique, Mythology, which was published in 4 volumes. And then another influence and a final influence I'll talk about. Whoops, I'm just looking at what I wrote on the board here, and I didn't really do it. Trobriand, excuse me. Can I remember what they call it today? Trobriand Islands. What do they call it today? Don't remember. Oh well. Moving on. Holism, which comes from, it means the same thing as the word whole. I mean, the Greek word holos means whole or complete. You can see that Greek and English are related languages from the same language family. So sometimes you get words sound almost exactly the same and they mean the same thing in both languages. So holos, whole or complete. And holism tries to study things from the whole complexity of its relationship. It doesn't just look at one thing. It tries to look at the whole. Okay, and this was a big movement in anthropology, especially in American anthropology, that was started by this man, Franz Boas, who was a German who emigrated to the United States and brought his idea of holism with him, and he's considered the father of American anthropology. Holism is also called the four-field approach, where you study biology, you study culture, language, and archaeology. So it's the complexity, the whole of things. You don't just study it you just don't study religion or any culture from one perspective, the psychological perspective or the sociological perspective. You want to have a biological background. Here would come into play evolutionism, sociology and culture, so that would be more anthropology. Language, you have to learn the languages of the people you're going to study. And archaeology, whatever you can dig up and find about their past origins. And you bring these all together and it will give you a more complete picture of the group that you're studying. And I'll try to do that in this course when I talk, and you'll see this in the textbook as well. So, I'll start out with, and I think the textbook does as well, start out with kind of like a background and a history to each religion. You kind of set it in its historical setting. It's any archaeology that's significant we might talk about. I'll give you terms from the language and try to explain some of the terms in the language. And stuff like that, and the culture and how the culture might have affected the religion and vice versa. That's kind of what's going on here. So social practices in the holistic approach must be investigated in the context of the whole, in the completeness, in their completeness, in their interconnectedness with other aspects of the society. So religion can't be viewed in isolation, but just as an autonomous system unaffected by other social realities. And this seems obvious. I mean, why did Christianity, speak the Latin language, at least for the Catholic Church, for almost 2,000 years until the 1960s? Why was that the common language of the Catholic Church? Latin. Why wasn't it Greek? That's the language of the Christian scriptures. They were written in Greek. Popular Greek, or Hebrew. The Jewish scriptures are written in Hebrew, so why didn't the early Christians continue on and speak Hebrew? Why is Latin? Well, because of the Roman Empire. They spoke Latin. That was the language of the empire. Eastern Christians tended to speak more Greek, because that was more the common language and the language of education before Latin became the dominant language. So you see here, The culture influenced the religion. People used to associate Catholics with going to Mass, and they had to speak Latin, this dead language. Not anymore, since the 1960s, but it used to be that way. But it's the culture. Why is Hebrew the language of the Jewish synagogue? Is it because of the religion? Probably not. It's the culture. That's the language that the ancient Israelites spoke, or at least a form of Hebrew. Okay, a form of that language. So that's what you'd be looking for, seeing how the society influences the religion. So that's the language they spoke, so that's the language that they put into their scriptures. And some Jews would even believe that's the language that God speaks. I don't know if I want to say anything about this. Theology is not religious studies. It's more of a committed point of view. And I might skip over this. I think I will. Don't worry about theology. I'm going to skip over this and go straight to well, we are kind of going straight to theology, really, in a way. So maybe I should say something about it. I'll say something about it. Let me get my notes out first. Moment. There we go. Okay. This class is a religious studies class, and it's not a theology class per se. I mean, I could turn it into a theology class, but I'm not going to. I mean, I will talk. I was thinking out loud before. I am going to talk about the Catholic Church, and so and its relationship to other religions, and that is theology. So I do want to say one or two words about what theology is. But for the most part, when we study the religions, we're not studying them, or I'm not going to be studying them from a theological point of view. What is that? A theological point of view is a committed viewpoint. You're coming from a particular view of God and ultimate reality. In this case, I'm coming from a Christian point of view. So we're in an Islamic university, they'd be coming in from position of Islam, what the Quran has to say about other religions. But it's not. It's a Christian Catholic school, so I'm coming from that perspective. And I'm setting that out before you openly. I'm not hiding it from you. I believe that Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the Savior of the world. I believe what the Catholic Church believes. However, remember, religious studies is descriptive and non-committed. It tries to be neutral. Okay? A person who studies Hinduism may be a Hindu as well, and may believe in that system or its view of ultimate reality. But as a religious studies scholar, that person doesn't deny those beliefs, it kind of sets aside the belief in order to just look at what am I seeing here? What functions do these beliefs serve? What do they provide for the community? How is the religion influenced by society, its belief system, and whatnot? And that's how I'll be dealing with each religion, even Christianity. So just so you're not kind of shocked, it's not like I'm going to talk about Hinduism and say, just give you the bare facts and descriptive, and Judaism, well, maybe not Judaism so much, but once we get to maybe Judaism, you say, yes, God revealed himself to Moses, and then he revealed himself ultimately through Jesus. And it's not going to be like that, okay? That's theology, which is fine, and I believe it. But religious studies, I'm going to be descriptive. I'm going to talk what we can know rationally, historically, rationally about Jesus, so we can understand about him and what was his ministry, what he did. Okay, I'm not going to be pushing a particular point of view, just so you know. But we do want to understand, because this is a Catholic university, where things come from, or what the view of the Catholic Church is and how it views religion itself. Theology comes from two words, theos, which means God, and logion, which means word, a word about something, a statement or a saying. So biology is bios, life, and logion, words about life, words, statements that the teacher gives you about living things. Geology, Gaia is the earth. So study, or we could say in an extended way, study about something, words about the earth. Okay, astronomy, words about, not astronomy, that's a bad example. But anyways, so just where the word comes from. But that's what theology is. But this is not a theology class. Not properly speaking, I should say. Where are you? There we are. Okay, so the Catholic Church and other religions. How does the Catholic Church view religion? Obviously, the Catholic Church is a religious entity, so it sits within the religions of humanity. I mean, it's not some unique thing in that sense, okay? Although it does stand in a unique position in its belief system, how it views itself. Whoops. Hopefully by now you've read some of the readings that are in the syllabus. For example, from the Book of Wisdom, from the Book of Baruch. I'm going to talk about them now. If you haven't done so, I suggest that you do. Otherwise, you won't know what I'm talking about. But if you have, then maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, these stories are, now you don't have to own a Bible for the course. I gave you a link on Canvas so you can find these stories online, so you don't have to buy a Bible. But if you do have a Bible, that's great. The Bible, just to get a little background, the Bible is the story or record of the one true God's special relationship with the Jews, who are the sons and daughters of Israel. This family, actually, it's a family, really. If you read the Bible, it's the story of God's relationship with this one family, which then expands into a nation of people called the sons and daughters of Israel. Israel is a man, actually. Take note. Israel is the name of a man. It's not the name of a country. His name is Jacob, but it's changed to Israel by God. So, and I'll mention this when I talk about Judaism, so I don't need to get too deeply into it here, but I'll explain it more. But yeah, essentially, it's not it becomes the name of a nation of people, but it derives from this person, this man Jacob, Israel, and his family, his descendants. God chooses this relationship; He creates it, and Israel is God's chosen instrument in the world through which He chooses to save. He wants to save the world. In the readings that we had, Book of Wisdom, 2 Kings, Baruch, stuff from the New Testament, Acts, the Bible does not condemn human religiosity as such, God bless you, or make a judgment on human religions per se. And that's, generally the way the Bible is. If anyone's ever read the Bible is not an answer book. It doesn't give answers to the question. It does, sometimes it does, but mostly or not, it's describing God's relationship with this group of tribes from the Middle East called the sons and daughters of Israel, the Israelites. And their place in the world and their relationship with God. It's not meant to be a history book or a science book, okay? It takes human religiosity. So, you can find answers to questions, but usually you have to extrapolate and think about it, okay? It just takes reality as it is, and human religiosity is one of those realities, and you don't find a judgment on an explanation of why people are religious or whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. The Bible just accepts the fact of human religiosity. The Bible just accepts the fact that people worship gods and spirits. Men and women can sense God's existence in the beauty and power of the world. You don't necessarily need the Bible to tell you that, but from the sense of order and beauty in the world, men search for that thing which is their source. And so this is one of part of the readings. I don't know if you've done it yet, but the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Again, you don't have to buy this as a textbook for the course. I give you a link on Canvas where you can find it online, so you don't have to. But if you did the readings from that, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2566, it states outright that human religions are concrete demonstrations of humanity's search for this source of order and truth and beauty in the universe. CCC, Catechism of the Catholic Church, 566. So that starts to give you an insight of how the Catholic Church views the world's religions, but also how it views itself in relation to them. Their Mankind's religions are humanity's search for the source of truth and beauty and goodness, which we could call God, or peace and bliss, which we could also kind of call God. Whereas Catholicism or Christianity is not a search, it's the answer. Jesus is the answer, the response to that search. And the Bible, in one case, the Bible recognizes that this human search is valid. So, for example, in the book, the reading from the Book of Wisdom, it recognizes that this search is valid and that people can find God through the study of the created world. But where does it go wrong? And here's what we see from the readings that I gave you. We start to see, especially for readings like from the letter of Jeremiah and the book of Baruch, chapter 6. Where has this gone wrong for human beings? Well, they mistake natural realities for supernatural sources and origins. They make them God. They look in the wrong place. They look at the natural world and see the supernatural there, which is not the proper place of the supernatural, Mr. Pratt. It is elsewhere. Worse, men and women actually go beyond that, and they make physical objects to which they then impute godhood. You know, it's bad enough that people might worship the sun, but the sun is impressive, and you can see the sun, and you can feel its heat. It's and even if you don't believe the sun is a god, because we know now scientifically what the sun is, still impressive. It's still an impressive thing. It's our star. But you can understand why in certain religions, that there's sun worship and stuff like that. But what's worse is, so that's kind of bad enough that you're worshiping a natural reality that's been created by the supernatural rather than recognizing the supernatural origins of it. What makes it worse is that men will go out and actively take a piece of wood or stone and make a physical object to which they then say, this is a god. Which makes no sense to the authors, the Jews, the Jewish authors of like the Book of Wisdom or the Book of Baruch, because you know who made these things. You know the creator, you know the artisan who cut the wood, who shaved the wood, and the person who polished the stone, and went with hammer and chisel and carved out a statue and put gold and silver on it and painted it. You know who did that. So how can it be called a god? It didn't even create itself. You know who created it. Joe down the street. At least in first instance, people are worshiping things that they did not make. Like the sun, which are clearly more powerful than they are. But idolatry for the Bible authors is worse, because people know the God was made by some person. You might as well worship the maker of the idol. Why are you worshiping the idol itself? Worship the person who made it. So let's look at some of these biblical writings that we looked at. Briefly. First, the reading from the Book of Wisdom. The Book of Wisdom is attributed to King Solomon, one of the Jewish kings. So the Jews had a kingdom. We'll learn this when we talk about Judaism's history. But at one point in time, there was a Jewish kingdom, and it had several kings, one of whom was named this man, King Solomon. And he was known for being a wise king, a very wise man. When did he live? He reigned, well, we don't know exactly, but he reigned around the 10th century BC. And maybe this is the point in time that I'll talk about this, because it is brought up in the textbook too. Circa around the 10th century BC, which would be the 900s BC. Okay. And since I'm kind of talking about dates here, let's talk about BC and AD. What are BC and AD? What do they mean? No one wants to tell me. Is that Ms. Purnell? Who's that? Ms. Pennick?
Before Christ?
Yes.
And then after?
After his death? Before Christ and after his death? Is that it? Partly. That's excellent, Ms. Pennick. I appreciate that. You are partly correct, but partly off the mark. Okay? but yes, the first two letters, BC, are an English abbreviation which mean before Christ. Now, this is gone over in chapter 1 of the textbook, which I wonder... Yes, Ms. Undercuffler?
Before Common Era.
Yes, Ms. Undercuffler. Thank you. We'll get to that. That's excellent, Ms. Undercuffler. We'll get to that. Ms. Owens? After denomination? Interesting. Okay. Getting we're still we're not hot yet. We're still a little bit cold on the AD. Does anyone yes. Anyone know what AD means? It does not mean after death. I know that might be what you want to say, but it's not after death. Ms. Reeser.
Is it the Latin? It's Anio. It's Domini.
Okay, good.
I don't know how to say that. But.
Excellent, Ms. Reeser. Yes, Anno Domini. See, this is what trips people up. Yes, the first abbreviation is from English, but the second one is from Latin. Not from English. Anno Domini. Because our calendar, and we'll talk about this more, I'll go over this some more when we talk about Jesus of Nazareth, when we talk about Christianity, but our calendar is based on what someone believed a long time ago who created our calendar, this man, believed was the date for the birth of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, 1 AD. Will be the start of our calendar, and everything before that is before the Christ, before Jesus, okay? So, he was writing in Latin, and so anno, and we had this word in English when we talk about something that's annual, I mean it's yearly. So anno, or year, annus means a year. And Domini, well, that's a little bit harder to work with in English because we don't really have any equivalent to that, but nevertheless, it comes from the Latin word dominus, which means Lord or Master. In Latin, it can be a complicated language because the endings of the words change based on their function in the sentence. Okay, so the word for year is annus, but here it's being used in the sense of in the year of. So it takes a different case. I believe the ablative case, but it doesn't really matter. So in the year of, so it becomes anno instead of annus, changes it to an O. And dominus is in the possessive, so it takes an I at the end, so it's of the Lord, so Domini. So AD, Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord Jesus. So it's been 2,024 years AD in the year of the Lord Jesus, or since the birth of Jesus in 1 AD, even though Jesus was not born in 1 AD, scholars believe, and we'll talk about that later in Christianity. The time before him is called before Christ, BC, in an English abbreviation. Now! That's our dating system. Our calendar is dated according to a religious figure. Our whole calendar is dated according to the life, the existence of a religious figure in the West. However, there are people, and Ms. Undercuffler just alluded to that when she said BCE. You mentioned BCE before the Common Era, yes?
It also stands for before the Christian era as well.
Okay, where did you find that out?
Either this textbook or I'm also taking a sub for reading the literature.
So you read the textbook?
Yes.
Why are you doing that? Why are you learning things all the time? That's not your purpose in university. Anyway, just kidding, Ms. Undercuffler. Yes, so it's in the textbook. You read the textbook, Robinson and Rodriguez talk about this. And yes, in a lot of textbooks now, religious studies, biology, whatever, history, they will use the terms BCE and CE. And it can be interpreted in two different ways. It can mean before the Common Era or before the Christian era, or it can mean Common Era or Christian era. And so BC would be for BCE would be the equivalent to BC, and CE would be the equivalent to AD. Why? Well, first of all, we have to understand that you can, if you're taking any history classes, just ask, your history professor can verify this. Ask the history professor, when is the Common Era? They will tell you there is no such thing as a Common Era. It just doesn't exist. It's made up. And historians do love to divide history up into all sorts of time periods. But there is just no time period called the Common Era, which seems to start when Jesus of Nazareth was born. It just doesn't exist. It was made up. Why? Because certain scholars in the 1800s didn't believe Jesus was Lord, so they were uncomfortable using dating, or at least saying that they're dating things according to the year of the Lord, Master Jesus. He's not their master. And other scholars, specifically Jewish scholars, were uncomfortable saying even before Christ, because Jesus isn't the Christ for them. He's not the Messiah. So they didn't want to affirm that belief. So they came up with this dating system, BCE and CE. As Mr. Coupler said, you can say it means before the Christian era or the Christian era, and that seems to work better if you interpret it that way. If you say before the Common Era, it makes no historical sense because there's nothing there. So that's what's going on with the dating system, just so you know. Okay, so and also note that you count down to the birth of Christ in BC, so you're going backwards. So 500 BC, 400 BC, 300 BC, etc., and so forth, and you count up from the birth of Christ in 1 AD. So Solomon lived sometime in the 900s BC, believed to have written the Book of Wisdom, but scholars don't think so, mainly because the Book of Wisdom seems to have only been written in the Greek language, and Solomon, as far as we know, was not a Greek speaker. He was a Hebrew speaker. So it was written by someone in 50 BC, someone we don't know who, probably not Solomon, and it is considered what's called a protreptic in literature. A protreptic is a genre of writing where one is trying to be persuasive. You're trying to persuade the person to your point of view, usually by insulting the points of view that you don't agree with. So that's essential to know about protreptic. It's not meant to be a balanced debate or giving a balanced viewpoint of contrasting views. It's meant to show the value of your view and the superiority of your view and the inferiority and negativity of opposing views. So it's not nice. It often uses harsh critical language, and you might have noticed that in reading from the Book of Wisdom. So the author of the Book of Wisdom, who was almost certainly a Jew, is reacting against Hellenistic or Greek culture, which was starting to influence Jews. And he doesn't want Jews to go over to this culture, this Greek culture, because he saw it as wrong, especially in its idol worship and stuff like that. It's polytheism, the worship of many gods. And so in writing, in the section that you read, the author highlights the stupidity. Not just that it's wrong or he doesn't agree with it, but that it's stupid to make idols and worship them. Hellenistic culture. Hellenistic means Greek. Comes from the Greek word Hellas, which is the Greek word for Greece. So Hellenistic is Greek. And, what happened was historically that show you here on a map. I'm going to get a map here. Okay, there was a man called Alexander who was from northern Greece, who a long time ago, I forget his exact dates, it was in the BC period, was it the 5th century? That sounds about right, but I don't know his exact dates. But anyways, in the BC period, who was a warrior and a general, and he led armies. I'm giving you the Cliff's Notes version, the short version of this. He led armies and conquered all throughout the eastern part of the Mediterranean, Egypt, Palestine, all throughout the Middle East, going all the way over to northern India, where he got a cold and he died. And he did this in a very short period of time. He was a very young man, and he did this, and he was apparently unstoppable. He was a great general, Alexander, and nothing could really stop him except for getting some kind of virus or something that laid him low and killed him. And this spread Greek culture and the Greek language all throughout the area, even into Israel amongst the Jews, even to northern India. We have statuary of the head of the Buddha, which is done in the Greek style and stuff like that. So there's even influence all the way out there where he was. But anyways, so this is called Hellenistic culture, Greek style culture that was brought to the people. And some Jews were going over to it because they thought it was better than what they were brought up in Judaism. And the author is reacting against that. He's trying to show that even though the Hellenists, those who follow this Greek-style culture, are supposed to be better, more advanced than us, Jews, yet they still make and worship idols. Aren't they so stupid? They're supposed to be the culture of the philosophers, Socrates and Aristotle, and yet they can't see the stupidity of taking a piece of stone, crafting it into something, and then trying to say that it's the creator of everything, of the whole universe, when it itself was created by some human being. So they philosophize, the Greeks philosophize about God, but cannot discern who he truly is from his works, from the created world, especially through God's saving acts on behalf of Israel. So in the later parts of the book, this wasn't part of the reading, but in the later parts of the book, the author recounts all these times that God saved Israel and blessed Israel to show them how special they are amongst all the people. What's the takeaway from the Book of Wisdom, chapters 13 to 15? The author does not deprecate or deny or dismiss humans' ability to know God philosophically. In other words, through rational thought upon the world. But without God's revelation, for him a Jew, that would be in the law of Moses, which God has given to the Jews, human reason deviates into nature and idol worship. Humans can know about God through reason, true, and they don't necessarily need revelation. But God's revelation purifies the inaccuracies of human reason. It redirects human knowledge when it goes in wrong or false directions. An idol. I should have defined it. What is an idol? It's any physical object that is used, or physical image or thing, I could probably say, that is used as an object of worship. Comes from Greek, the word, oopsie doodle, comes from the Greek word eidolon, which means a phantom, an image, a likeness, ultimately from the Greek word eidos, which means any form, shape, or figure. That's what an idol is. It's a figure or a shape that you make, carve, you paint, you paint a picture, draw a picture. Any of those could all be idols as well. Any kind of form or shape or image that's made and becomes an object of worship. Doesn't necessarily have to be a physical figure, but it often is. Next, we had a reading from the book of Baruch, chapter 6, which actually is a separate writing. Scholars believe it's a separate writing called the Letter of Jeremiah, a prophet named Jeremiah, a Jewish prophet. And in my opinion, really should be taken out of the book of Baruch. It should be its own book of the Bible, but it's kind of attached to the book of Baruch as chapter 6. Why? Well, because this man Baruch, this Jewish man, was a scribe. He was a secretary. He would write stuff down for the prophet Jeremiah. Okay? And we're told about this in the book of Jeremiah, where he appears. And someone later used Baruch as the author of this book, the book of Baruch. And since the letter of Jeremiah was connected, because Baruch was supposedly the secretary of Jeremiah, they attached the letter to the book of Baruch. But it really is a separate writing called the Letter of Jeremiah. The letter claims to have been written by the prophet Jeremiah who lived around 645 BC and died sometime after 587. But most scholars say it was probably written by someone anonymously in the name of Jeremiah. Hard to date, probably around 300 BC, maybe. Or did I say not 300, my notes are wrong. The 100s BC, excuse me. So anytime from 100 BC to 1 BC, just before the AD. So anytime in the first or the last 2 centuries of the BC period, 100 to 1 BC, is the best guess. And it claims to address Jews who are being led into exile. The Jews were attacked. Again, you'll understand this more when we do Judaism and I go over the history. But the Jewish kingdom is attacked and destroyed, and the upper crust, the rich people, were all deported, exiled all the way out to what's modern day Iraq. Since we have a map, I'll just show you. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I can barely see it. There it is. Going back to our map, here's Israel and here's modern-day Iraq. So they were deported all the way over here to Iraq, which in the ancient world was called Babylon. Did I put that on the account? No, I did not. So I'll write it here. It's called the Babylonian exile. So ancient Iraq. And when they go there, they're going to be amongst, they're going to be a minority. They're going to be amongst a plethora of non-Jews who are worshiping their gods and their idols. And Jeremiah doesn't want them to get confused and to kind of lose faith in the God of Israel. So he writes them this letter. And this letter is in the genre of a satire, which is a genre that uses humor to expose and make fun of evil and foolishness. It comes from the Latin. I didn't put that in the PowerPoint, so it doesn't matter. Just like protreptic, satire is not necessarily a fair genre, but its insights may be. Okay? Like, for example, in the letter of Jeremiah, it kind of makes fun of the gods by saying, look, even cats know that they're not gods. Even cats. It's the only place that cats are mentioned in the Bible. Dogs are too. The only dogs are mentioned in the Bible too. But it's the only one place cats are mentioned in the Bible. It's in the letter of Jeremiah and Baruch. But even maybe using this kind of silliness. That cats. Of course, cats have no respect for anybody. I'd have to tell Jeremiah that I'm sure there were cats in Nazareth. I doubt they even respected Jesus. Because that's just the way cats are, It's like cats are cats, They don't fear God nor man, You can imagine Jesus in Nazareth being like, come here, sweetie. Come here, Mr. Marbles. I'm the Son of God. Cat. Anyways. But it's satire. Satire is stereotypical, okay? So to some extent, satire is meant to be unfair. But that doesn't make it untrue, okay? It doesn't make it untrue. Now, you have to remember that writings such as these, like the letter of Jeremiah, are written by outsiders. The Jews are outsiders. Insiders might have objected that it doesn't really depict their religious beliefs and practices accurately, but God is making a point through the author's use of a satirical genre. You don't have to share its negative view or words to see the truth that it's saying. Oh, that's where I put idol. I didn't put idol up there. That's weird. Look. So to give you a sense from the chapter 6, would anyone like to read this from the letter of Jeremiah? Yes, Mr. Holstein. Thank you, sir.
And now, so for carrying shoulder punch has fear congregations. Take care to keep yourselves devoutly tumbling these corners. Let not be such fear possess you. When you see the crowd, saying the verse, you, Lord, are the one to be worshipped, for my angel is with you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, he's telling us what you will see. You know, there'll be like, and think about like if you ever gone to a festival or something like maybe they don't do this like San Gennaro or San Rocco or something like that. But sometimes this is especially true, it seems, in Italian communities where they'll take out statues of like the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Blessed Mother, the Mother of Jesus, or even statues of Jesus, and they'll carry them around on their shoulders. A bunch of men will carry them around on their shoulders through the streets and stuff like that. And that's kind of like what's going on here. You know, Jeremiah is saying, you'll see them carrying the idols of their gods around through the streets on their shoulders, people bowing down and worshiping them, but you don't do that. Know in your heart, just say, notice he doesn't say, don't say it out loud, because that might get you killed. Don't want to piss everybody off, but just say to yourself, you alone, God, you're the true God, you alone should be worshipped, and know who you are and what you believe. And so you see this in religions even today. I mentioned Catholicism, Hinduism. People, they carry the gods and goddesses around during festivals and stuff like that. And just in the same way. And it's what makes Hinduism so fascinating, at least to me, is that it's really the oldest and only pagan style religion that we still have in existence. And so a lot of the attributes of Hinduism you find describe the same kind of attributes in the Bible, because it's still, those religions are long gone. The pagan religions of the Greeks and the Romans and the Middle Eastern religions are long gone. They don't exist anymore. We have descriptions of some of their practices in the Bible, and the rest you have to get from any writings or archaeology we can find about them. But a lot of the practices tie into Hinduism because it's still a living religion. So you find some of the same kind of practices that are mentioned in the Bible, like, carrying gods around through the streets on your shoulders, temple prostitutes, stuff like that. They're still around. Dress, as Jeremiah says in the letter, dressing the gods up in clothing, wiping the dust off of them, stuff like that, feeding them. Waking them up for breakfast and stuff like that still goes on in Hindu temples. You have to wake the god up in the morning for breakfast and feed it and dress it and clean it and stuff like that because you believe it's alive. Here's another one. There's a cat. But the sweetest cat you could ever meet. She's dead now, unfortunately, but she was the sweetest cat you could ever meet. Wouldn't harm a fly. Unless you were a fly, then she might eat you. But I'll read this one. Their idols' courtyards are walled in like those of someone brought to execution for a crime against the king. Okay, like, you put them in jail in a way. You put them in these walled compounds like they're in jail, like the criminals. The priests reinforce their temples with gates and bars and bolts so they will not be carried off by robbers. The priests light more lamps for them than for themselves. Yet not one of these gods can see. So they're all constantly lighting all these lamps and candles, or, well, maybe not candles, lamps for, but the gods can't see? How many lamps do they need is basically what he's saying, Even the priests don't need that many lamps, but the god does? Is the god, have eyesight issues? Yeah. Their faces become sooty from the smoke of the temple, from the burning, from the, the lamps, from incense being burned and stuff like that. Bats and swallows alight on their bodies and heads, any bird and cats as well. So even the animals don't respect them. They, the birds, sit on them and poop on them. The cats lie on them and sleep. They show them no respect. Know, therefore, that they are not gods. Do not fear them. And that's one of the refrains of the letter of Jeremiah. There are two refrains. One of them is, so he gives you examples of their stupidity and then says, know that they're not gods and don't fear them. And the other one, he'll describe, the maker of the idol and stuff like that. How then can they be gods? Is the other refrain, his other question. I'll pass over that. In our other reading from the 2 Kings. Now this is an interesting story. This is a little different. This is an old story. In the book of 2 Kings, this preserves an old memory. And there's this man, this prophet, called Elisha, or Elisha in Hebrew, which means God has saved. And that will make more sense when we see the story. And Elisha apparently lived from the 9th to the 8th centuries BC, so from the 800s to the 700s BC, before Christ. And he was a prophet in the region of Samaria, which is in central northern Israel. And this is a picture of when there were two kingdoms. The one kingdom of Israel had split into a north and a south version. And the south was called Judah, and the north was Israel, and its capital was in this place, Samaria. And that's the region that Elisha was from. He was a prophet in that region. Prophetess, who is a prophet, just in case before I say that, he was a wonder worker. He worked, you could say miracles, but he was a wonder worker, and he was a political revolutionary. He dabbled in politics a little bit, overthrowing governments, and he was generally believed to be a prophet. What is a prophet? Basically, a prophet is someone who speaks for another person, usually a god. But a prophet could be someone who speaks for anybody else. But in the religious sense, it's for a god. So a prophet, we could say, is, what I wanted. I thought I put it on my PowerPoint, but I guess I didn't do that. All right, fine. So I won't give you the definition. Don't worry about it. And for the Jews, a prophet was someone who both spoke on behalf of God and revealed his will to the people, but could also reveal future events that were shown to him by God. So it has that dual feature of speaking God's will to people and also sometimes foretelling future events and prophecy. So a prophet is someone who both tells and foretells. Now in this story, a pagan, a non-Jew, named Naaman, who I believe is a military leader, get this out of the way. This man Naaman comes from the north, from Syria, or Aram, as it was called in the ancient times. And he comes down here to consult Elisha or Elisha. Why? Because he has a skin disease, leprosy, they call it. But it's a general term, catch-all term for any sort of skin disease. It could be eczema. It could be actual leprosy. Since Naaman wasn't apparently infecting other people, maybe he just had eczema. But nevertheless, he had a skin disease which, bothered him, made him, even though he was a great general and was respected, it kind of also made him an outcast in a way. It was something that bothered him. And he comes down to visit Elisha to seek a cure, because none of, his God that he worships can't cure him. Ramon. He worships this god called Ramon, who cannot cure him. So he has a little Jewish servant girl, and she says, well, my God could probably cure you. And there's a man of God, a prophet down in Israel who's a powerful man, and he might be able to help you. And Naaman's like, what do I need a foreigner for? I've got my own gods. We've got our own doctors here. But he goes nevertheless, and he meets with Elisha. And Elisha is able to heal him. It's an interesting story because, Elisha tells him, go bathe in the Jordan River, which is this river that goes from north to south here in Israel. All right, he says, go bathe in this river. And again, Naaman's kind of like, well, don't we have rivers up in Syria? Well, what makes this special? But do it, and he does it, and he's healed of his skin disease. And he comes back to Elisha and says, I will not worship any other god. I know there is only a God in Israel. I will not worship any other god. So he asked, can I take earth? Can I take earth from here and bring it home with me so I can build an altar for me, a personal altar, so I can offer sacrifice to the God of Israel, because I won't worship any other gods. This is an interesting point because, you see this in the Bible, but also in ancient religions. This was not unusual, but this is also the Jews. Every region had its own god. So this is interesting because, believe it or not, the ancient Jews did accept the existence of other gods. They were just not their God. It wasn't the God of their region, of their neighborhood. So that's why Naaman wants actual dirt from Israel, because the dirt from Syria won't mean anything for the God of Israel. It's not from his neighborhood. It's not from his region. He wants actual dirt from Israel to bring back so he can build this altar so he can offer sacrifice. Even though the Jews in the Bible accepted that there was the existence of other gods, that didn't mean that their God was any equal to them or any less. The God of Israel, these other gods were always lesser beings than the one true God of Israel. He was the supreme God. And so in the ancient Near East, people thought that each god or group of gods ruled a particular region. So that's why Naaman worshipped the god of his region, which was Rimmon. But, what do I say here? Okay. But here we have God, the God of Israel, who can heal this foreigner, this man from a foreign region, not just people who are Jews. So it shows us there's an implication here that the God of Israel, unlike Rimmon, the god of the Syrians, is not bound to any particular region in a way, even though that's kind of like what the Jews believe. He can heal anyone from any place, even this man from Syria. And if the God of, and the implication that's going on in the story is, if the God of the Israelites is not bound by regional location, he's not bound to any place, then he's bound to all places. Everything belongs to him. So the God of Israel can heal someone, even someone who comes from another god's realm of action. So, so when Naaman says this is a really important development or detail, that Naaman will now only worship Israel's God. This was unheard of. You had to worship the God of your area because that was what you were linked to. People didn't convert to other religions. In fact, it would be bad to convert. You'd upset the God of your region, if you weren't worshiping him or the goddess of your region. You worship the God of your area. And, Naaman realizes that the gods of the nations are not really gods at all. He says there is no God except in Israel. So you have here a revolutionary statement for someone to say, which is monotheism, which was not until the Jews, and even amongst the Jews, this idea had to develop that there was only one God, only one supreme being, and there were no other gods. This had to develop, but certainly for this guy Naaman, who was a pagan, and in most societies, this was not a common idea. It was very unusual. Sometimes it appears in other cultures, every now and then, but usually it's in the form of there's one supreme God, and then there are all the lesser gods underneath this supreme God that you worship. That's usually how it manifests itself. Not like with the Jews, where there's one solitary God and no other God. So that Naaman is saying this is kind of revolutionary. And that might be the message that the author is trying to portray. Okay, because remember, someone is writing this. It's not like it's, a report in a newspaper or video. Someone saw it on video, It's a report. The person has an agenda here. They want to show, yes, there's only one God, and that's the God of Israel. Now, Naaman does not fully convert to Judaism. He doesn't become a Jew. He doesn't say, okay, I'm going to worship the God of Israel, and now I'm going to become a full-time Jew. In fact, he says, I can't really do that because of my job. In fact, he says, I still have to participate in some of the worship services for Rimmon, because my leader believes in him, so I have to be there by his side. But I'm only worshiping the God of Israel. So that's enough for Elisha. If that's as far as Naaman can go, he has realized where the truth lies and is trying to follow it as best he can. Okay. That's as far as I'm going to go today. And I will see you next week. God bless you all. Darn it. I don't know if I can. Well, let's see. Have a good day. You're welcome. Thank you, Ms. Foster. You too, Mr. Urban. Thank you. Ms. Undercuffler. You too, sir. Thank you. Have a good day, sir. I don't know what my account is. Have a good day. Have a good day. I don't know what my email is. That's not going to work. Okay.